Hello everybody! That Delta Rabbit here, back to my old ways once again. We have a brand new fan project review ahead of us, the Phi-Sigma take of CJD known as Counting the Journey's Days, whose premise is that every track is labeled 1 through 220, going up every 3 days until the end. You're counting the days and logging them with entries written in the description of the video and Bandcamp page alike. CJD's original concept came from a week-long endeavor by Matthew Etter, now known as Peaky, of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. CJD is an incurable brain condition that rapidly eats away at the brain, killing them within a year in most cases. It can lead to dementia, weakness, mobility issues, and in later stages of the disease, coma, and eventually death. CtJD is split between 13 different records, each being 4 or 6 tracks long, mainly 6. In order to cover this, I have taken them to 3 separate parts, 1 through 4, 5 through 8, and 9 through 13, following its release order. It's going to be a lot of ground to cover, and a lot to talk about, so let's get started with the exposition. Something I noticed while listening to this for the first time is how warm and enveloping a lot of the beginning is. It's a contrast that I like compared to the cold confusion that something like CJD had. The first track, noted as Rest or Sleep, is the classic sleepwalk intro for these types of projects, letting you know that this is going to mainly use surfer adjacent samples, at least to your knowledge. It does follow a lot of the samples that the original CJD had, but it doesn't feel like it's already starting to get worse. It doesn't really feel like a recollection, but rather a feeling. Emotions being represented through a decaying lens. You see it in the second record a bit more, that depressing and confusing tone throughout. Streams, delay, and sample choice is stellar, makes me happy that other people appreciate the trombone and its versatility. Life's production and a lot of the production throughout reminds me of the ambient Americana records like James Ferrero's Last American Hero and Old Saw's discography. As the third record comes in, it shows its teeth a lot more, being turned into melancholic horror that keeps you unsafe. Elude and Spiral are 2 highlights, the first being melancholic sadness, looking out the window of your home, wondering if there's anyone out there to see you, whereas the latter feels like forgetting something important and breaking down because of it. The fall becoming more and more apparent. The fourth record is where all of the cracks begin to form. A lot of the sounds and panning make me feel uneasy and disoriented, as it should. Mulder's panning especially feels like it's trying to form a memory but only remembering a single part. Delay has, well, delay. And a lot of it. It feels like the same as Mulder, but more unnerving because of the timbre of the sample itself. But coming back to my personal favorite track of this entire thing, it's gotta be Lord. It's such a grim and disgusting sample at the end of this part, this holy look into decomposition. I remember this vivid image of a lamb being decomposed in time-lapse as I listened to this. A VHS tape that had been dubbed over with half a dozen different tapes, this being the final one. It truly terrified me and brought me to tears when I originally heard it. Overall, this first part is probably the most simple we will get, and that's saying something given how crazy it is already by that last record. We increase a lot of the progression of this disease throughout the next part. The records contain a lot of different samples from the previous installments, but this time it's completely different. The music here feels like it is rotting between each track. Hands really shows Phi's skill as a producer, making the track feel like there are 2 different tempos going on at the same time. It's a really disgusting thing to hear, but there's more to come. The audio effects and destruction really tell a story rather than a progression of disease like other versions I've heard. It feels like a real person who had all their best moments of their life ripped away from them, leaving them isolated and barren. One thing I've noticed while listening to The Grand Decline is Phi's infatuation for destroying piano tracks and instruments. Washout is probably the best example of this on the record, with its eerie sliding and constant crackle of vinyl. It really gives the feeling that you're standing under the limelight trying to tell an audience a speech, but you can't find any of your words even when they're written out for you. There are several tracks on here that still do this sad horror. Phantasmagoria, for example, gives me late 20th century piano piece notes, or something that would be on Ghost Passing by Jandek. But there are other tracks that groove to me, such as 2 tracks later on Hallway and then Shadow Puppets, though the latter one turns just as it starts to feel like things are alright. Time, when I was writing down the notes for this, felt like the equivalent of putting a towel through your ears and polishing off your brain, smoothing out anything that is left in your mind. Desperately sounds like one for sure. begging any sort of higher power to set you free from this disease with no actual answer. And yet, it still doesn't feel like the final moments of coherency until 142, known as Ride, Slipping, Gone, and its predecessor, Arise. Arise is a blip of a track that tells you the direction that will be going clear as day, but not without one final goodbye. 142 is the last track with a readable title, meaning that most of these next part will only be referred by numbers, as some of them will be locked behind a key or just have zero intelligible letters at all. One thing I can say about this is how volatile yet still claustrophobic, slightly warm and beginning to spiral it is. The production on this entire record so far is unlike anything I have heard from a fan project. The samples being manipulated and giving hints of what's really to come in the post-awareness sections of this. Let's take a look now, actually. It is here we begin the true potential of both the infiltrator software that Phi uses and the twisted mind of Phi himself. Off the bat, instead of the sound collage that most post-awareness is known for, it is replaced with this brutal and dense noise wall, supplemented by ambient tones and atmosphere. The only thing that you see is your left ear giving you barely enough intelligible audio for you to hear. The good majority of these sounds and manipulation reminds me of how Doopies does it, especially on tracks like 148 and 160. One little anecdote about 148 specifically is that later on the track there's some form of like apple eating sound, which would be quite funny to hear if it wasn't for the screams and freakiness of the rest of the layers. There's several sections where the music just evaporates, leaving only fragments of itself, such as 178 going from the aftermath of music to being full-on instruments in themselves. The music titles become unrecognizable, reverting themselves to ancient letters and blocks eventually. 181 is the equivalent of ancient voices being revived by rotting technology. There are some pretty interesting moments up until the last two records actually, notably the final two tracks giving us the first clear recollection. 193 having a countdown broadcast and the guitar loop underneath, and 196 putting you at ease for one last time. Something about this production throughout is insane. There isn't a single original thing in terms of soundscape sources, it's all completely made of samples. Create bell tones, synth chords, noise walls, textures, and piercing beams. The amount that this is regular sound collage is negligible. This is straight up a black ambient album until the end, where it all just turns into ambient. It really is crazy what Phi was able to do with such little material we received on the original CJD. By the time you get to the end with 214 and the closer 220, the final fleeting moments of life leave us with a little bit before taking that away too. Only the elongated sounds of dial-up are left by the time you finish. It was a callback to the original, and I think that's the best part about it. It pays homage, but still being its own thing. Phi, whether as themselves or as the artifacts, is nothing short of the greatest fan project producer of all time. As a solo artist, it is genuinely impressive how much they are able to do with the concept of CJD. This project proves no matter how bad a project can be, it can always be picked up by someone else in order to make something beautiful. My first project of 5 was going to be The Grand Decline, but yeah, that's gotta be a 500 sub goal. But CtJD is what I would consider the perfect project to represent what they have to offer in a reasonable format. It shows their skills as a creator, as an artist, and as a destroyer of sounds. The only things I would fault this project for are non-issues, like some of the loops being too repetitive and a singular track that I found to be boring, 133. Otherwise, this collection tells the story of a man who breaks into pieces until he cannot recognize anything he sees in this world, and fades away into a shell of what he once was. I'm feeling a 97 out of 100, putting it in the S tier of fan projects. What did you think of this project? What are your opinions on it? Let me know in the comments and tell me which I should review next. Thank you so much for watching, eat your veggies, and have a good day.